Welcome to Illuminati Silver. We tell you the truth about silver. Today is Sunday the 22nd of January 2023. And we're looking at gold and silver prices performance last week and what we envisage it to be this coming week, with particular attention on Friday. Now, before we look as to the reasons why we say this, just a quick reminder that last week we produced two videos, our gold and our silver price forecasts, and we have placed links to both of these videos in the description box below. Let's now take a look why this coming Friday could be so important. Gold rose $6 last week, rising from $1,920 to $1,926, having hit a high of $1,964 and a low of $1,896, a rise of 0.3%. In sterling terms, it finished the week at £1,554, that's down £16, and in euros it closed at €1,775, that's up €2. Clearly sterling strengthened last week. Silver fell 33 cents, falling from $24.28 to $23.95, having hit a high of $24.52 and a low of $23.19, a fall of 1.4%. In sterling terms, it closed at £19.33, that's down 52 pence, and in euros it closed at 22.07 euros, that's down just over a third of a euro, 0.34. The gold to silver ratio rose from 79 to 1 to 80.4 to 1. The difference between gold's high and low was $58, very similar to the previous week, and the difference between silver's high and low was $1.33. Now, we did predict last week that we expected to see gold's trading range for this coming week to fall between 1875 and 1975, with 1850 and 1995 as outliers, and it traded well within our normal trading range bracket. For silver, we stated we envisaged silver will trade between 23.50 and 25.15, with 23.25 and 25.50 as outliers. Silver did trade within our normal range for much of the week, but actually fell considerably on Thursday, taking it just slightly below our outlier range low by 6 cents. Now let's look at other financials. Bitcoin is on a tear, currently standing at $23,090, a rise of $2,276, which means it's now risen over $6,000 in the past 2 weeks. Equities were mixed last week, with the Dow Jones closing on Friday at 33,375, down 927 points, and the S&P 500 closed at 3,972, down 27 points on the week, but the Nasdaq closed at 11,140, and that's up 61 points on the week. Oils, unfortunately, were higher this past week. Brent crude closed at $87.63, that's up $2.35, following the previous week's rise of $6.71. And WTI crude closed at $81.64, that's up $1.78, following its previous week's rise of $6.09. The dollar index stands at 102.01, down 0.19 points on the week. Now quite a far cry from just a few weeks ago, or a couple of months ago, when it surpassed 114. Now let's take a look at the economic data that was announced last week and what we can expect this coming week, which may indeed affect gold and silver prices. Okay, so looking at last week's data, we can see obviously Monday nothing was scheduled because it was Martin Luther King Day. On Tuesday, we did have the Empire State Manufacturing Index for January, which actually came in much lower than anticipated. The figures came in at minus 32.9 compared with minus 7, which were the expectations, and minus 11.2 in December. More noteworthy, though, were the retail sales figures, and these were the figures that really we were focusing on for this week. And we can see that retail sales were actually down minus 1.1% against expectations of minus 1. This is for December. If you exclude motor vehicles, the figures were even worse. They were down 1.1 against expectations of minus 0.5. The producer price index was also lower, and industrial production was lower. Now, this is suggesting a weakening of the US economy, which would certainly not surprise most people who are living there. On Thursday, we then had initial jobless claims. Ironically, they were down. Expectations were 215,000, and the jobless claims actually came in at 190,000, though the continuing jobless claims actually rose. And this again is showing that although perhaps the markets are a little weaker, they're not having such a profound effect necessarily on jobs. That may cause the Fed, and this is part of the reason, just part, why on Thursday we saw this fall in gold and silver prices, the strengthening of the dollar, simply because there was the fear or potential that the Fed might be a little bit more hawkish on the 1st of Feb when it announces its next interest rate policy than many were now beginning to believe. And then on Friday we had existing home sales, which were also quite buoyant at 4.02 million. Coming week is interesting, though quite frankly, Friday is the key day and the most important day now for the month, and we'll explain why in a second. We have manufacturing and services flash PMIs on Tuesday. We'd rather see the final versions, quite frankly, so we're not too exercised by that. Nothing scheduled for Wednesday. Thursday, jobless claims, of course, but Friday, this is it, the day, the PCE price index for December. And this is going to be the determining factor on what happens to gold and silver prices on Friday, followed through on Monday, Tuesday, because that is going to give very strong indication as to what the Fed's decision on the 1st is going to be, which will be the following week. Watch out for that one. That's the key. That's the one we should be watching very closely. So, as mentioned, Friday next week is key, and it'll be most interesting to see what happens to gold and silver prices and the value of the US dollar in the run-up to that event, and immediately, of course, post the announcement. It's important to bear in mind that a number of Fed officials made their comments known during the course of last week with regards to inflation and their views on interest rates. Many of them have addressed the need to continue their aggressive monetary policy of interest rate hikes as their major tool to address and reduce the current level of inflation. The Federal Reserve is on record stating its plan is to take its benchmark rate to above 5%, even with recent data indicating that inflationary pressures may have peaked. Cleveland Fed President Loretta Mester said, quote, "I just think we need to keep going, and we'll discuss at the meeting how much to do," unquote. Our view is that rates will eventually peak at either 5.25 to 5.5, with 5.5 to 5.75 being what we perceive is likely to be the maximum. That said, of course, even then it'll take many years before the inflation rate comes down to 2%, if it ever does. If the Fed were really serious, they'd be raising rates as high as 7 or even 8%. But that would tank the equity markets if adopted aggressively. It's simply a matter of how much pain can people bear and how much risk are the authorities prepared to take. So where does this leave us in terms of gold and silver? Well, we've said all along that the start of the new year would be bullish, and the fall in the US dollar as well as good CPI figures helped propel both those prices forward. And next week will be quite telling when the PCE figures are announced. Gold is seen by analysts to be in a strong position, and many believe it is heading towards $2,000, with 1875 and perhaps 1850 being its lowest point for many weeks to come. Silver has somewhat consolidated, with 23.50 showing some reasonable support with $23 underlying. $25 at the same time is showing strong resistance, with interim resistance around the 24.50 level. For this coming week, we anticipate, therefore, to see gold trade between 1875 and 1975, with 1850 to 1995 as outliers. The same as last week, in fact, though next Friday may indeed cause some serious market movement. We envisage silver will trade between $23 and $25, with $22.50 and $25.50 as outliers. What do you think? Please share your thoughts. Tomorrow we will republish this video under a different headline and thumbnail, and in fact we might also produce the gold and silver forecast as a combined video if we get time. Finally, if you're considering thinking about purchasing gold and silver, then do make contact with the Pure Gold Company. We've put a link below, who are only too happy not only to discuss short-term purchases and sales, but also longer-term strategies and retirement considerations. They will also offer you a discount on special terms if you state that you were referred by Illuminati Silver, and we too will receive a very small consideration if you do actually use their services. Meanwhile, thank you so much for listening. If you haven't done so, subscribe to the channel, press the bell sign, and check out the videos that we've posted links to below. Finally, we wish you a safe, enjoyable weekend, and as always, a prosperous year ahead. Illuminati Silver owners come from a background of banking, international wealth management, and economics. Having now retired from these worlds, we are not qualified to give investment advice. Therefore, this and other productions must not be deemed to be giving such advice and merely represent the personal views of its owners.